So this is coaching toward personal and accessible instruction. We'll go through and make sure that we have some community agreements and norms, and we'll go through some introductions here. So let's go ahead and move on to that next slide. So if you're joining us today, and this is your first time joining one of our VILS webinars, we like to go over our VILS community agreements here in the very beginning to make sure that we're setting the tone and setting the stage for everything that we're going to be talking about today. So the first things first, we've got an accessible space here. So we've got closed captioning on. So that's one of the pieces that we have as a part of our accessible space for teaching and learning. But what I want to make sure is that you mute or unmute your microphone to speak to make sure that we have a clean recording. And what I mean by that is like, as we have this recording space, you're adding your questions, you're adding your thoughts. The reason that we say mute and unmute your microphone, think of it like a walkie-talkie, because it will be a part of that recording. For anybody that has any auditory acuity issues, by making sure that we're mindful of that space, that enables us to have a clean recording. And so what I also ask for people to do is, if you want to ask a question, please also turn your camera on if you are able to be able to ask that question, so it also becomes a part of that recording. But please feel free to use the chat for comments, questions, anything that's out there. I'll make sure to address those questions and make sure that we're getting those addressed. Next piece is be mindful. Be mindful of the power dynamics of the room, the realities of the room. Everybody's coming at this from a different space. So making sure that we are aware of those realities, that everybody's coming at this from a different space, and being mindful of that reality in that space is helpful as we go through this learning environment, right? Everybody's in a different learning ecosystem. Let's be mindful of that reality and help them to get to where we want to go. Right? Smartest person in the room is the room. So let's build a bigger room and be mindful of that reality. Next is be as present as fully possible. I've got kids, I've got dogs, I've got cats, we've got all these other spaces. I might have to cut my camera or anything along those lines, but be as present as fully possible as you can in your current learning space. And then ultimately be kind to yourself and others. I like to say it as this: be hard on content, easy on people. Like I said, we're all coming at this from different angles. So the more spread kindness that we can, the easier it becomes to learn, because if we're hard on content, easy on people, that helps us to work through any of those other spaces to be able to get to the learning. All right, let's move on to that next slide. So, oh, yeah, here we go. Let's go for our check-in. What is your ideal learning environment and why? I'm going to go ahead and drop this link here into the chat for our Jamboard. And Jessica, you got anything you want on this one?
No, we're going to keep this really open-ended, but I just want you to reflect a bit on, you know, when you're learning something, what is your ideal learning environment?
So I just dropped that link to the Jamboard into the chat. If you're just dropping in, please click on that and we'll be able to share our ideal learning environments. You can go ahead and drop in an image, drop in a thought, whatever it is that you're thinking. Oh, visual learning, nice.
I'm loving some really interesting spaces. So I appreciate this one, that this environment that allows for curiosity, questioning, exploration, and a positive surrounding. I think that's great. I think it's also interesting just to notice some of the differences too, like engaging, hands-on, tech integrated, but also we have ideally quiet, calm, but learner-centered, you know, so very interesting to see where there are similarities and differences. And I think I saw one, but I'm working with the small screen here, so bear with me, I have to move things around. Looking at thinking about some of the differences in a online virtual environment versus in person. So really great range of things to consider here. Physically concentrate and fully focus, yes. So definitely some similarities around engaging in technology and some hands-on things. This is great. Thanks. So I want to also just recognize and name here that sometimes Zoom isn't our ideal learning environment. And I appreciate everyone engaging and following the norms that Dan shared around that. Hopefully today's session will have some opportunities for you to engage with some hands-on ways and using technology. And so hopefully we'll be able to create as best we can a learning environment that reflects some of the ideals shared here. I'm going to wait for that control panel to get out of the way and flip back to the next thing, which is just to kind of introduce myself and our moderator, Dan. So my name is Jessica Jackson. Some of you may have seen me before. I do work at Digital Promise as the Practitioner Partnership Director for the Learner Variability Project. But prior to coming to Digital Promise, I was a teacher, a principal, a coach for about 20 years collectively. And so excited to work with you today and share a little bit about the tools we have at the Learner Variability Project. And I am grateful to have Dan Foreman here as our moderator.
Hi, folks. I'll be here kind of hanging out in the background, but also helping with questions, helping with any technical difficulties, anything along those lines. But I'm the Director of Training and Professional Learning here at VILS. I've been here for almost 5 years, and I've had the honor of working at all levels in K-12, from being an educator to being a coach, instructional technology coach, and even a district administrator before coming here to Digital Promise and being a part of this great group. So I'm glad you're all here. Happy to be here. Thank you. Jessica, back to you.
Awesome. So today we're going to be talking about some of the key findings around learner variability. We're going to be connecting learner variability and culturally responsive instruction, and also completing you'll have the options to complete different self-reflection activities that you can replicate with educators. And so today we're talking about personal and accessible instruction. And so I wanted to spend a few minutes kind of unpacking what this means when we think about our powerful learning framework. And so these bullet points actually come from the Powerful Learning site on Digital Promise. And the first bullet point here is just that every student has a unique jagged learning profile. And this is really, this graph here is one we use a lot when we're talking about learner variability. And some of you may already know about learner variability in our project. And so I would love to hear kind of when you think about learner variability and this idea that every student has a unique jagged profile, what does that mean to you? Or what are some of the key ideas or words that come to mind when you think about learner variability? And I want to just welcome you to either come off your mute or put that in the chat. All right, anyone feeling brave out there? No?
Hey, one thing that I think about in terms of learnerability and how it is that jagged sense is what I found as I dove deeper into it is also, I've always found like the sleep piece interesting and how that can vary from day to day and what that might look like. And so how that learner variability changes day upon day around what they need, but it's also an affect around what that environment might be and where they're coming from. It can also then change based off of what that jagged profile is, what those different variabilities are. And oh, I see Brittany put something in the chat there. Like, students have to be empowered and motivated. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that, Dan. You did hit on one of the key aspects of learner variability, which is context, right? And how context can really impact and be different from day to day and impact the way that we learn. So that's really important. Brittany, thank you for sharing in the chat ways that work best for them, I think is really important. And when we think about personal and accessible instruction, I think helping students understand and really what works best for them so that they can advocate for themselves and use their strengths is really important. Yes, and Glennard, I hope I'm saying that correctly. You make a great point here. Another key aspect of learner variability is thinking not just about the challenges and deficits that students have, but also the strengths. And so really understanding that is great. Yes, so motivation is key. And I think that kind of hits on the third point, which is really understanding the connections between what we call the whole child framework. And so understanding that the learning process does involve our social and emotional factors. It involves cognitive factors as well as academic factors and student background. And so understanding the connections between all those factors help us, engage students around their strengths, understand how context can impact students. And so that's really important. So thank you all for sharing your thoughts on that. And it's okay if the term is new. That's great. One thing that I do think is important to kind of distinguish is that learner variability is different from learning styles. And so learning styles is actually a very popular term, but is not backed by research. And one of the reasons for that is that when we kind of label ourselves or student with learning styles, we tend to think that that is the only way that we learn, and that ignores this idea of context and how context can change, and how you might learn in one teacher's class that you really have a great strong relationship can be very different than another's, or how you learn in math may be different depending on how you feel about math than how you learn in reading for the same reasons, right? And so understanding that what works best for us is actually going to change. How we learn online and virtually may be different from how we learn in person. And so it is great to do what we call multimodal instruction, which is where all three are present: visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. And research does show that when you provide all three of those options, it helps with information processing and storing that in long-term memory. But just want to avoid kind of oversimplifying and labeling all the different factors that can come into play when you're learning. The next point I wanted to talk about is this one here, that students cannot learn if they do not feel physically and emotionally safe. I think this is, in some ways, feels like a no-brainer, but I wanted to kind of take that maybe to a level deeper, right? And so if we think about what does it take to make a student feel emotionally safe and make them feel like they really belong in school, and no matter what strengths or challenges they come with, whatever their background is, that school is a place that they can learn and be successful. And so this is something that we have on the Navigator, which we'll share with you a bit more. But on the Navigator, we have different factors. And this one is called sense of belonging. And so this is basically, our team reads a lot of the research out there on learning sciences around sense of belonging and then summarizes it here for you to use. And so as a coach, I think this is a great tool because you can really kind of get an understanding of some of the different factors that can impact your students. But if you look at this first paragraph, I think it really makes some key points that a sense of belonging allows us to feel included, respected, and supported in schools. And it is heavily tied to our identities. And so it is also context and culture dependent. And so school settings have the potential to be a source of adversity or a supportive environment, fostering positive identity and development. And so when we think about our ideal learning environment, and we think about what does that look like for our students, right? And how do we make these environments, what messages are they getting from their environment when that environment doesn't meet their needs? And so when I think about what it takes for students to feel safe physically and emotionally, I think a lot about that sense of belonging factor. So Oh, one other thing I wanted to show you real quick on that. The control panel keeps getting in my way, sorry. If you scroll down, so this is giving you the research. I think we have someone who's, thank you. Below the research on the factor are research-based strategies that have shown to be able to support this factor or mitigate the negative impact. And so this is, again, another great tool as a coach that you can really help identify if a sense of belonging is something you think a teacher may want to work on. This helps you identify strategies that can support that. And so here are a host of different strategies. And if you click on a strategy, it takes you to a page, again, where you get an overview of what the research says. And then often there's an example that includes a video that you could watch with the teacher, as well as products that may incorporate this strategy and resources to support it. So again, just with my coach hat on, wanted to share this. And when you're looking on the Navigator, if this is a tool you're not already familiar with, these are all the different factors that can impact learner variability. And we have, 6 different learner models in K-12 for you to explore, as well as an adult learner model, which can be great when you're thinking about the teachers that you coach. And so you can explore the different factors like the one we just looked at, which is sense of belonging. And you can also look at the different strategies that we have in that learner model. And so here there's just 108 strategies, which again, as a coach, sometimes you need to come up with new strategies and ideas, and maybe those ideas aren't just flowing. And so coming to this page and kind of scrolling through some of the strategies can help. And you can also see which factors they support. You can also filter the strategies across multiple factors. And so as you check more boxes, you can just see the factors that are addressing all the factors. Just see the strategies that are addressing all the factors you've selected. So that's just wanted to share this, and you'll have a chance in our activity section later to explore the Navigator in more detail. But the third idea around personal and accessible instruction I wanted to share is just that agency and autonomy are key motivational factors in learning in life. And so thinking about what are some of the ways that we can provide opportunities for students to feel agency and autonomy and to be motivated. And so connecting, content to things that students care about, giving them choice are really important. But as a coach, I would say it's also really important to make sure that your teachers have opportunity to feel agency and autonomy too, because often, teachers create what they experience. And if they feel like they don't have a lot of agency and autonomy over parts of their day or instruction and curriculum, then it's going to be harder for them to figure out how to fold that in for students. And so going through, thinking about that and ways you can incorporate that with guidelines for teachers is important. All right, so what the research says. Culturally responsive practice considers how to engage students in the learning process, both cognitively and emotionally, through an understanding of how their identity and perspective is shaped by their culture and community experiences. And what I think is really important when we're thinking about culturally responsive practice is how this is distinguished from other approaches to equity. And one of the charts that I really appreciate is this one by Zaretta Hamlin, which really shows some of the distinctions between multicultural education, social justice or anti-racist education, and then culturally responsive education. And if you look at this chart, I think this can be helpful sometimes too to share with your teachers. to help them understand that all of these approaches have their place and their purpose, and they work together. They're not sequential. But if we're looking at culturally responsive education, one of the things that I think is really interesting when you understand learner variability is just that it's really about understanding the impact of culture and identity on the cognitive aspects and how to engage students in the learning process with, an understanding of their culture and their background. And so I just wanted to share this chart in case it is helpful. And so just kind of trying to bring these two ideas together. When you understand learner variability, it can help dispel the myth of the average learner. That there's no such thing as just this one size fits all. As we saw on the chart, every learner is unique. There are different factors and that can impact students and show up as strengths in one context and challenges in another. And so understanding this unique set of strengths and challenges is really important. And when we're doing applying culturally responsive practices and lenses to things, it's also important to understand that students are still going to respond differently to those practices and require different supports. And so again, if we just think about sense of belonging, like what makes one student feel like they belong is not going to be the same as another. And so really kind of, diving deep on that and understanding that. Another factor to consider is looking at stereotype, threat, and motivation. And a lot of you mentioned motivation in your ideal learning environment. And so thinking about how to looking at that factor with that culturally responsive lens is really important. And so one of the tools that I wanted to share with you for your coaching toolkit is our topic page on culturally responsive instruction. And so this link gives you an overview of what culturally responsive practice is, and it breaks down a bit more about why it matters, how it connects to learner variability, which is what we just talked about. And so I wanted to let you know that this resource is here when you're working with your teachers around culturally responsive practice or doing a PD yourself on this. And we also have some examples from the field that are great to incorporate. So we have free EdWeb webinars, which your teachers can watch for free CE credits. We also have a guide that we worked with educators who are experts in culturally responsive practice, and they developed this guide for us. And then we also have workspaces. And workspaces are a tool where you can select certain factors and strategies that you want to focus on around a specific topic. And so in this way, you can kind of customize the factors and strategies that you may want your teachers to work on for a specific period of time, or to support certain efforts around, social emotional learning or culturally responsive teaching. And so all of that lives again here in this topic page. And so how does this all relate to coaching? Research has shown that even brief professional development for educators on the science of learning and memory and how it connects to classroom practices can have vast benefits for their confidence in understanding instructional approaches, including student-centered approaches. And what we know about making learning personal and accessible, what you all shared in your Jamboard, is just that having things be more student-centered is really helpful in addressing learner variability, motivation, and culturally responsive practices. And so sharing a bit about learner variability with your teachers can help them embrace some of the practices that you may be advocating for in their classrooms. So I wanted to share a few different tools you can use to kind of help make sure that your teachers understand learner variability and culturally responsive practice. The first is a self-study guide that we have, and this you can pull from and create your own PD or share it with your teachers directly for them to explore. We also have the topic page that I shared with you around culturally responsive practice. But one of the tools that I would highly recommend you using is the self-reflection, which Dan just put in the chat. And in this tool, teachers reflect on their own learner variability and how that shows up. And you can use the adult learner model to identify what factors show up as strengths and challenges, what strategies do they prefer. And I think as a coach, there are two things that this tool can really help you with. One, understanding a little bit more about your teachers, but also seeing how, helping them reflect on how their preferences show up in their teaching. So often we teach the way we prefer to learn, right? But that may not work for everyone in their classroom. And so helping them kind of be reflective practitioners can help them be more open to maybe trying new things that aren't in their comfort zone. And then the other resource we have is this culturally responsive practice guide that I mentioned earlier. And it has a lot of reflection questions in there and protocols. And I see if I can quickly show you. So in the guide, there's a table of contents where you can kind of move to the different sections. But we have reflection questions here, which again, having those right questions to ask, teachers to prompt them to think differently is a great tool that I always liked having as a coach. And so the questions are organized around the learner variability framework, questions that promote cognition versus social and emotional learning. And so pulling out a few of these to really talk with your teachers about when you're planning with them can be a great tool. And there's also protocols that you can use to either promote, individual reflection with teachers, or we have some that you can do with the PLC or group team of teachers. So those are some of the tools that I wanted just to share with you so that you can pull those into your coaching practice in ways that make sense for you. And so before we get into the activity, I just wanted to do a quick check on, and so you can put this in the chat, but don't press enter yet, but think about which number feels right for you, and then we'll enter it. So your options are, I'm unclear about learner variability or culturally responsive instruction. That's a 1. A 2, I understand how learner variability and culturally responsive instruction are connected. 3, I could explain the importance of learner variability and culturally responsive instruction to others. And so if you're ready, you can go ahead and put that in the chat. Awesome. Seeing a mix of responses here. Great, so mostly 2s and 3s. Hopefully the slide I just showed you previously, and you can have access to this deck, but you can link through and kind of explore some of these other resources if you're feeling like a 1 or a 2 to get yourself stronger. So, yes, let me see if I can quick, the link was shared, but I can share it again really quick. Chat. Great. Okay. So some of the ways that you'll be using technology today are, 1, to use the Learner Variability Navigator tool. You'll be using that to either do the self-reflection or create a workspace, and then thinking about ways you want to support ongoing reflection in virtual spaces. So now we're going to move into the application challenge, and you'll have some time to go into breakout rooms based on the option you choose to work with other people here. And so we have, the first option is to complete that self-reflection that we looked at. And so trying it out for yourself will help you figure out how you might want to adapt it for your teachers. And so you can use the self-reflection and our adult learner model and just kind of work through that. And in a breakout room, feel free to share with the other people in the room kind of how you're thinking about certain factors. And it is really interesting when you do the self-reflection to think about, not all factors are strengths all the time. Sometimes background knowledge is a strength and sometimes it's a challenge, right? Depending on, if I was talking about stock markets today, my background knowledge would be a challenge, but talking about education and learner variability, it's a strength. Option 2, you can look through the culturally responsive practice guide and pick out certain questions or protocols that you would like to prioritize with your teacher. And so again, just kind of going through that and discussing with the other people in your room what pieces of this guide stand out as being helpful and why. And then, oops, so sorry. The third option is to design your own workspace. And so just like the one I showed you, you can use workspaces to select certain factors and strategies that you want to support. And I wanted to quickly show you one other example of one that I did create with the coach, which is opening math routines. And in this workspace, which we include a video, you can kind of watch us talking about the workspace. He really wanted to incorporate culturally responsive practices into the opening math routines. And so he included this content that was from his district that he works in. And then together we identified what strategies would help teachers support this practice. What strategies would help them support student thinking and ownership. And so this is just another example of some of the ways you can create a workspace to support your coaching practice and then share it with educators. So I'll drop a link to that workspace if that's something you're interested in exploring. So take a minute, decide which option is most appealing, and then Dan's gonna tell you how to get into the right breakout room.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what I'm going to do here in a second, folks, so like while you're looking through those options and you're choosing which option you want to do, I'm going to let you choose your breakout room. I've got 3 rooms per option. So the way that it's going to be labeled is option 1, room 1, option 1, room 2, option 1, room 3, option 2, room 1, right? And so it's to give us about 4 to 5 people per room. Just you're going to see that list. Just choose the room that you want and you'll be able to go through and be able to access that room. If you're having any problems with it, I'll be here to help you out to make sure that you can get you to the room that you need. You can also, once you get into that space, raise your hand. I can jump into that room and be able to help you if you have any issues, right? And we'll make sure, and I'll jump these directions right here for any of the options. So if you need questions, have any help, feel free to ask. We're here to go. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and open those rooms. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Folks will be dropping back in here in a second. Already dropped that Jamboard in. There we go.
It's being recorded.
All right,
Jessica,
well,
take it away.
well, thank you. Welcome back, everyone. I got to pop around to most of the rooms. I didn't make it to quite all of them, but I really appreciated the conversation and the questions across the different rooms and really thinking, and seems like everyone picked option 1 or 2, but really thinking in both of those about the role that reflection plays in the coaching process. And so we have a Jamboard here. There are, just wanted to point out, different pages depending on which option you chose. And so I'd love for you to just take a minute and think about what maybe some of your takeaways are or how you might use this tool in your coaching practice. And we talked about some really interesting, different thoughts on how people might incorporate this. And so hoping to capture some of those here. And while you're adding to our Jamboard, if there are any questions or anything that I can answer with the few minutes we have left, I'd be happy to take those now.
I want to participate, but I'm having technical difficulties right now, so I can't get on the Jamboard.
If you want to just put it in the chat or share,
Okay,
go ahead.
Yeah, I updated the settings as well, so it should be public.
Oh, thank you, Dan.
So go ahead and
Sorry
refresh. No worries, it happens. It happens to the best of us. I think folks are gathering their thoughts. Love seeing
Yes.
this come forward.
Oh, I really like this one here. I think that this, I'm so glad, I don't know who put that there, but I really appreciate, being as a coach, I think modeling what you want your teachers to do and sharing your own learner variability and how you think about that is really powerful, and then can really open the door for them to share more about themselves. So that I appreciate that one. Yeah, and so I see that coming up in other shares here. Yeah, I think having this, kind of like a story too about kind of how your learner variability shows up in different contexts is a great jumping off point. Another thing that came up, I think this was, I have to credit the right person, I think it was Nathaniel, talked about the importance of not just doing this one time, but really thinking about, after different PDs or different learning opportunities, maybe having teachers reflect a bit on what factors showed up here, what strategies worked, what didn't, and kind of making this an ongoing piece, I think could be really powerful as well. Let me peek at the other one and see. Great, and yes, I think what's great about both tools, the self-reflection is just a general learner variability, like reflective tool. But then I think when you add some of the reflection, and I think it lays the groundwork for really reflecting on the ways that your learning shows up in your teaching. And then you can add the culturally responsive practice questions in to really push teachers around, like, well, how is this affecting your students, and thinking about them through different lenses. And so, I think using both tools together can be really powerful over time. And yeah, I like this one too. You can do this as a group activity, a team activity. I'm actually doing later today, we're doing this as like a team builder to kind of help understand our team as learners and how we can support each other in our strengths and challenges. So that's a great way to do it. And also you could do it, more one-on-one as a coach. So thank you so much. I appreciate your engagement, the conversations today. I hope these tools were helpful. My email is on the slide at the beginning with my name. And so if you have any questions as you're using this tool, you want to reach out to me, any questions about the Navigator or anything from our presentation today, I'd be happy to follow up and support you. So please reach out. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dan.
I got you, no worries.
I'm gonna flip it over now. So we debriefed our activity, and now you can take it away, Dan.
Absolutely. So here you go. This is our link to the attendance and feedback survey. Please fill that survey out to log your attendance and also provide us feedback on today's session, right? At the end of that, you can also receive a certificate of completion via email. So that will also be there, but make sure that you cross every T and dot every I, and make sure you got every @ symbol in there to make sure that you get access to that certificate. What we will do is we will also, I believe that I don't know if she's still on or not. Will the slides be shared afterwards, Lucara? I'm pretty sure in a follow-up email.
Yes, during the follow-up email, and then they can also access it on the registration site where they signed up for today's session.
Gotcha. Not a problem. Just make sure that if you are having issues filling out the form, that you are doing it in, I believe, Chrome browser or Firefox. Safari can have some issues with it, but just make sure that you can work through that process. Go on to the next slide, please. So upcoming workshops, make sure you're looking down the road at the calendar. So start thinking about what are these other series that you want to be interested in, that you want to have access to. A lot of really great materials are coming through. We'll make sure that we add that into the chat as well, so that you can also get that link. Let me get that, copy the link. And there it is in the chat for you all to be able to sign up for all of our Summer of Powerful Learning series. Next slide, please. And also take the time to visit our VILS HQ. That VILS HQ Learning Portal provides a ton of different resources, especially some of the forward-thinking AR, VR applications, as well as lesson plans to really be able to take that in, as well as professional learning for what that might look like. So all of that is specific within that space.
We also
make sure to
have-
check it out. Go for it, Jessica.
Oh, sorry. We also have on the professional learning piece several different courses on learner variability as well as micro-credentials. So if you wanted to go deeper around any of that, we have that on the professional learning platform as well.
Awesome. That is everything. As long as you got that survey done, thank you all. I appreciate you all for taking some time to spend with us today. And thank you, Jessica, for being such a great presenter and showing us all of this great information. As I always said, like the Learner Variability Navigator is such a fantastic tool that we always underutilize and being able to push it forward. So I've used it a lot and I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you.